So I'm Tracy. I'm actually co-founder of a WhatsApp group that got wildly out of control and is now, as of May 22nd, a company limited by guarantee in its own right, a social enterprise. So we are a community group that makes remote work local, and we use remote work as a tool for community development. So we started off in July of last year after years working with co-working spaces that were popping up all across the country. So there's about 300 co-working spaces that are popping up all across Ireland, and I'm actually going to put on my timer here at the same time, and they were not at full occupancy outside of city centres, largely because they were focusing on startups. And for these co-working spaces to thrive, they needed three cohorts. They needed anchor tenants who would definitely pay you the rent. They needed your SMEs, your sole traders, your freelancers, where the rent might be a little bit less predictable, but you really needed to support them and they were why you were doing it. And then the third bracket were remote workers, but we had no access to them. So we started off thinking, why are we hearing that there are 216,000 remote workers in Ireland, the same as employed in the tourism industry? And we're hearing so much stuff, but we're not seeing it, we're not feeling it, and we've no access when we were looking at it from a co-working space perspective. So we began setting about, a Lithuanian guy who lives in Cong in County Mayo set up a WhatsApp group, and I put in all of the people that I was working with into that space, and we began just taking a curious approach to it and keeping going until we saw the impact. So first of all, what is it that we mean by remote work? We mean permanent work, where you get your salary, your pension, your salary, your holiday pay, your sick pay. So same as you get employed in a local company, these companies just might not have the office or might have a huge proportion of their employees working remotely. So I'm not sure, to give you some examples, I'm not sure how many of you know of Buffer, but they recently came to Tubbercurry for our event in the Smart community there. They're a social media scheduling company, but they're 100% remote. And if you think about the companies, I know we hear about the brain drain in rural Ireland, but if you think about the companies that young people want to work for, it's these companies, right? The companies of the future aren't actually, and the companies of the present aren't actually forcing you to go into city centres. They're happy enough to let you live where you're happiest, because they know that will enable you to be more productive, and they'll save on costs. So to give you an example of what it'd be like if you're working for Buffer, you're talking about a base salary of 70,000 and multiplied by your experience. Buffer are a very transparent company. When you pay them, they tell you where each of your what your customer payment goes towards in terms of what they spend it on in the company. So with salaries, they're the same. The likes of Doist, they've just come on board as an employer partner of ours. You get 40 days paid leave and per year. And in terms of their feedback from staff, it's 4.5 out of 5. So they're brilliant to work for, all the same benefits that you have for a company. They just happen to be remote. Shopify, they're a company that the IDA landed. It's led by John Reardon in Ireland, who works with us very closely. So they give you work from 7 a.m. till 3 p.m. You start off on 29,000. They pay for your cleaner, your home office, all of that stuff. And there's somebody working for Shopify in every county in Ireland, excluding an island, which we are on. So I guess we found those companies after trying an awful lot of things. We speak about commuters, and I know, I think it's 59% of Wicklow County Council's 6,000 people they surveyed want to work remotely and not commute out of Wicklow. So when we started that, we started going to the T-junctions, and places where there was bottlenecks and traffic, and saying, oh, you don't have to commute anymore, you can stay and work here. People aren't commuting at 6 o'clock in the morning because they have the option. They're commuting because they have to, because their employers aren't allowing them to do that. So we had two options. We said, okay, well, where are you going? We'll go to your employers and we'll speak to them. We went to the employers, and the employers don't care about us speaking about the Burren or about Gorey or about Carlow. They care about the commercials of enabling their staff to go flexible and remote. We weren't able to speak that language at that point. We were just purely interested in our communities growing. So, okay, what do we do now? And literally, I'll never forget it. We were in Tullamore one night. It was wet and windy in the new co-working spaces headed up by Caroline. And we Googled remote work, and we found 1,000 jobs. We were like, Jesus, do you think remote work was here all the time? And fundamentally, that was the first kind of clicking moment that we realised that the reason that we didn't know it is because we were looking to Dublin. And speaking about location when it comes to remote companies is just a fundamental misunderstanding of the two. So we actually needed to look to Europe on location lists. And if you look at jobs.ie, which is still the #1 job site in Ireland, and you search in jobs for Roscommon, you'll find, not the careers that you'll find in Dublin City. But if you want to go on to nodesk.com, you'll find 1,000 jobs that you can work for wherever you are. And so that was our first kind of going, we might be onto something here. So we learned a number of lessons. We learned, okay, look, if we just tell people where they need to find these jobs, they can live and work where we are. And that'll be it. Really naive. But we set about getting a get started guide. So essentially the problem with remote work is that they're not on the books of recruiters and they're not on the jobs board, we know, because nobody can make money off getting these jobs locally, and a recruiter can't earn a fee. So we said, we'll just tell them where to go and we'll put these all in one place. And we did that, and we have that on the website. And we go into schools and we tell school kids that the people that they want to work for, who are the most forward-thinking organisations, will actually let them work here. And they can go and travel, but they can come back. You know, they have full flexibility. And we go and we put up posters and we have discovery days on the main street, and we're at conferences and business expos where the remote working companies just can't be. And then we learned, we were in an ETB in a rural location, and they said to us, how do we know this isn't a scam? And actually there's a Facebook group on that is Work From Home Ireland, and it's full of scams. That's work from home, you know, pay us 3,000 and we'll let you earn however much per year. Ridiculous. So we help people decipher between permanent jobs that are, you know, you can move your career along, and the scams, and that's pointing to services like Glassdoor and connecting people. So if you want to work for Hotjar, we know 2 people in rural Ireland that work for Hotjar. And the last one is the most important one, and it's bridging the cultural gap. So it's essentially the last mile of remote work. And what we learnt is that this needs to be translated on the ground in rural communities by local people for local people. So on Achill Island, if that's on the bar stool on a Thursday night, and that's where you speak about remote work, and that's how you make it happen here, and that's how you get the grandparents to talk to the grandkids and ask them have they considered it, or it's on the GAA sidelines, or it's something that translates the language of remote work to the language of rural. So, as I said, right, we had started off by going up to companies and talking to them about, I remember there was a lady, Anne Finn from the Burn, and she had this amazing pack. So like, you got a year's free in the gym, you got 2 years free in the golf course, you got, I should basically have a concierge service for you if you moved down there. You know, it was tremendous. And she went to companies and she said, if you tell your staff about this, they can move here. But the companies didn't care, because again, we weren't speaking their language. And so fundamentally what we realised is this: if the companies let the jobs go remote, go locationless, then the communities don't need to speak to the companies. The communities need to speak to the people, and that's where we can win. That's where we can speak to people who want to live, outside of city centres, and we can talk to them about the quality of the air, your happiness of your kids. I know Tubbercurry has the world's fastest kid in Tubbercurry. I mean, if you want your kids to be sporty and active, that's where you want to be. And I suppose, so what we want to do is focus on the fully distributed teams, companies without offices, and then also get more companies to go remote. And once they go remote, we'll just target the talent, and that's where we think we can really thrive. So this is a main street in rural Ireland. I was at another talk in Cusson, Virtual Community College during the week, and there was a guy who was speaking about talking to somebody about an older man about the App Store, going to the App Store, and he said, where is that now on the main street? And it's the same thing with this form of employment. So that is a main street. This is how we see it. So Nearform, Dois, Scraping Hub and Buffer are all employing locally. But because it takes a different mindset, we're not seeing it. Now, they're never going to put up signs on our main street. They're never going to be there. But Grow Remote can. And we pop up with discovery days on the main street and tell people about the opportunities and how they can get there. So we did not have the answers, as I said, right? We were just community groups trying to get to what we needed to get to, which is people living and working and spending time and money in our communities. A couple of things happened. One is Shopify versus Buffer. So Shopify are an IDA landed company, which means they ring-fenced those jobs to Ireland. That isn't what a remote person would call remote in some instances, because remote should be completely without location. But for Ireland, that's brilliant, because it means that we're just competing with our own group. Whereas Buffer is fully distributed, so that runs across time zones. Wayfair showed us a map of where they hire. Wayfair are another Irish company, 200 remote jobs. And they hire in, applications came from Dublin and Galway. Because if you ask somebody in Tubbercurry, do they know who Wayfair is? They don't know who Wayfair is. And so again, it's an education and gap, we thought. And Stripe, I guess, was the big one for me a couple of weeks ago. Stripe are a big payments company. Their first 4 hubs were in cities. They were in Portland, Oregon, Silicon Valley, Dublin. Their 5th hub was a time zone. It was remote. It was North America. And what they looked for is people who were familiar and understood remote working. And that's what we can do. We can make sure that our communities are remote ready and equipped to drive with that kind of a workforce. So we set up chapters on a platform called ChangeX, and it was essentially just expanding the WhatsApp group. And chapters are local communities of remote workers. And they look to do one of three things. Get their current community employed in areas like Tipperary, where the unemployment rate is higher than average, or the employment black spots we still have, or Monaghan, where the average salary is 22,000. And we've trained up people around that, and I'll go into that. We attract new people in. So we run town tasters, where again, we open up the piece and say, come for a pint with us, because you can work wherever you want. So come for a pint. Learn who you can go to mass with on a Sunday, pints with on a Thursday, hockey with on a Wednesday. It's all the human factors. And actually, Valentia Island succeeded in getting 2 people to move to the island in Kerry, running a town taster. Dingle invented it. And connecting remote workers. So in Castlebar, you now have 100 people meeting up who are working for all of these tech companies, and now that's visible in the local community. So this is a map of where we are in Ireland, and we're in 4 other countries. We're only 7 months old. So we kind of ran before we could walk, but there you go. So we have town tasters. We have reskilling. We ran up. We trained up 110 people in the skill of remote work. We have a nomad trail. So essentially, nomads are people who can live and work across geographies. And if you look at, there's a website called Nomad List, and if you look at why they travel, it's got nothing to do with the speed of broadband, although the reliability of broadband is a factor, but it's not number one. There's an inverse relationship between the cost of living and why they travel. The number one reason they travel is curiosity and a willingness to explore cultures. What do we have in spades? Culture, that's what we have. So we set up a nomad trail it's in Sligo, Armagh Island and Mayo, and we'll be expanding that down along the way. But it's to help to bring people into these co-working spaces that are in very small communities, and not only have tourists experience our culture, but share their knowledge with us and vice versa. And that helps the enterprises in the area too. And then we have events and programs like that, and again, that's to get people together and to educate people. So look, the benefits for communities, there's lots around environmental, there's lots around skills in terms of if you want to attract IDA companies in, you can say, look, the skill sets are actually trained all around the world. They just happen to be very local. But really for me and for us, it's about fair competition. We can finally compete in the things that we're really good at. And we can attract people who understand the way of life and want to do that. What we realised though is that we need to bring it all together. So awareness in itself is not okay. We need to plug it all to piece. So we now have Operation 5, and Operation 5 is our goal to get 5 people employed remotely in rural Ireland, and to just make that impact. So we have awareness programs, we have reskilling, but where we did just train 110 people up, we're now going to bring it into an office in Monaghan County Council, and every week people are going to take part in a 2-hour program together and learning online. We have employer partners. So finally we have companies who come in and do one-to-one interviews, mock interviews. They'll do Q&A sessions to help again bridge that knowledge or cultural gap between them and us. And we built our own jobs board last week, and it's one place where you can list companies for free and get all your jobs for free. It's on Remote Jobs Ireland. So my question to you is, how many jobs are in Kilmallock at this very moment in time? Anybody?
About 700.
Feck it. Who answered that? Okay, super. So how many jobs are currently open in Kilmallock? Okay, 403 right now. I know, right? So if you go into Remote Circle, and again, this is an emerging sector, right? So it's only launching now. RemoteCircle.com, and you put in Kilmallock, you'll see 403 jobs, because jobs are no longer in locations; they're in time zones, and so they can be here. Okay, now it's a tiny bit disingenuous because those 403 jobs are shared across the time zone. So we want to put our communities at an advantage by coming local and bringing this where many other communities are. But we're still competing an awful lot for those jobs. So if we look at 3 streams of remote work, you've got your 100% distributed, those are across time zones. You've got your IDA jobs who ring fence, who get a Wayfair and IDA and Shopify to announce jobs in Ireland specifically. And then you have your Irish owned companies who are in Dublin, who for the first time in 3 years, talent is the number one challenge that they have. And 77% of their staff are asking them for more flexibility. A recruitment company in Dublin that partner with Sneem Digital Hub say that a year ago, 15% of people were not taking jobs in Dublin because of the cost of living, and that's now up to 30%. So when they don't go to Dublin, what options do we give them? We really need to be able to give them ours, and we need to empower those companies to hire those people and not live in Dublin. We're not urban versus rural, we're just rural. If we focus on those three, right, we can make the short-term wins off the fully distributed. We can encourage more stuff around the IDA, and they are being tremendous, and they are really driving this. And then we can support Irish-owned companies. So when we built this jobs board, and it was only last week, and so we got no budget. It was totally volunteer, and we're still very young. So, but we started going to companies and saying, "Hey, will you list your jobs there?" And they say, "Yeah, we hire remote. Of course we do. We don't promote it." We're like, "Oh, can you promote it?" And as soon as they do that, as soon as they bring those jobs on, they say specifically, "This is locationless." That brings a world of opportunities to our communities. I was up in Armore Island. Did anybody see the ad that's all over TV? Yeah, I think it's great. So Jerry, who's on the forefront of that ad, and he is speaking about the decimation of the island. His son went to GMIT for a year studying business. And he decided after going to Galway that he's seen the world and he wants to be an islander, So he dropped out of GMIT. When you've been to Galway, I think you actually have seen the world, but he's dropped out of GMIT and he went back up, and he's a digital marketer, and he's an amazing guy. He works in the pub during the day, and he runs a food truck in the evening. And he wants the island life. And if you think about him in terms of the ones and twos that we need to cater for, where FDI or these multinationals are attracting companies to announce 50 jobs in Kilmallock isn't possible. It's this kind of stuff that it can enable the likes of Paul to stay. So in Armore, we now have a project called Project Paul, and we're just going to keep on going until we get Paul the job. It probably will be difficult, but if we can crack it, then remote work can enable the rural areas that are too distributed to attract the big companies, and that can enable our way of life to sustain. There are other projects like this that are happening across the world. There's a community called Tesla, and they're paying people $10,000 if they'll move to their community with a remote job. And there's a program called Rural Online Initiative in the States as well. And they're training people up through workplace lists and finding them to get jobs. The economic advisors, we were on a team with the 10 economic advisors in Montana yesterday, and they were saying that, or economic developers, and they were saying that the cost of acquisition of a job in terms of remote workers and in terms of versus companies, it's a huge amount cheaper. And the benefit of it is, again, that they're not targeting the companies, they're targeting the workers. And that's a completely different mindset. When we were speaking to the government, we were saying, these jobs don't come with a ribbon cut. Somebody's in their house, they apply online, the interview's totally online, they get the job online, they're paid, and they're here. But we never hear, Shop or GitHub announce jobs in Kilmallock, but they still are here. So I guess that is Grow Remote as it is today. If you can help us with Operation 5, we'd really love that. So if you know of anybody, employers who could join us on that journey, that would be amazing. But the other thing that you could do to help us is just direct people towards Remote Job Ireland or Remote Circle. And when they're looking for work, or when somebody wants to move home, when the recruiters won't tell them, when the jobs board won't tell them, it needs to be community people who tell them. Thanks a million.